This is the CTQ Smartcast, where we have conversations about upleveling, deliberate practice, and getting future relevant. Hi, so welcome to part two of our special CTQ Smartcast episode on introducing everyone at CTQ and talking about future rings. So let's jump straight to the next person, that is Sanasi. So Sanasi, I want you to introduce yourself. Two different versions of the introduction. One is the LinkedIn friendly introduction of what you do at Choose to Think, and how would you describe what you do at Choose to Think to, say, a 75-year-old person?
I had prepared for a 5-year-old. Okay. So yeah, the LinkedIn version is basically I am a curious mind is what we go with, which is basically the prerequisite that you need to work with Choose to Think. So should be I learn every day. I learn from my colleagues, and if I have to say what I do, it's what I would tell a 75-year-old or a 5-year-old for that matter is basically I write, but I write in a way that makes sense to other people, not for a byline. I write things to put a message across. I design things in such a way that that message is understood better. And as part of that, sometimes I write questions. I might write quizzes. I might make up games. I might write true stories. But writing is the crux of what I do, and designing as a layer of presenting that message. So
So you do,
yeah,
magic with words.
that's the best answer I've given in a long time to this question.
All right. So the next question is, let's see if it is relevant to what you just talked about in your introduction. So the next question in our futurings, featuring themes that you had answered was, what are the skills that you haven't used in some time that you think you should update to be more relevant in the future?
So basically, I think the nature of writing itself is very different, and the way we use it nowadays has changed a lot. It has. I remember when I used to work as a journalist, we realizing that whatever we are writing today is raddi tomorrow. So that has completely changed now. It stays for a long, long time, though you can delete or whatever, you can change it, but it stays. And the attention spans, which have largely reduced to so many things. So if you have to think about skills that I haven't used in a while, which I used to use, was writing headlines. And I think that's, I remember even in journalism school, that was one of the things that was one of those things we never thought would be important, but you realized on the job that whatever beautiful copy you write, it's absolutely of no use if your headline is really bland and it's not going to capture the curiosity of the reader. So in today's world, writing headlines in such a way, writing your subjects right, basically capturing attention is a very useful skill, and I have completely lost touch with that. So designing your words in such a way that they pack more meaning and pack more attention seeking uh, visuals into your words, that's important. Then anchoring videos is something that I had done a lot in the past, which I haven't done for a while. Again, I feel it's very important skill. Whole world is going very visual and very auditory as well. So knowing how to anchor videos, how to be okay with speaking to a camera or speaking on live Zoom sessions or meetings is very important. Editing, quick editing, your turnaround time in delivering something should be very quick in the visual medium. We used to do that when we worked with creating videos for young children, and we had these little tricks up our sleeves which we used to, you look as if you have spent a lot of time doing them, but they were actually really easy tools that any one of us could use. So sort of reinventing and reusing those skills to create quick content is one thing, and even delivering close to deadlines nowadays, because we can chop and change frequently. I think we have got this tendency of seeking perfection rather than just delivering. And in a newspaper, you have to send it out, but nowadays you tend to take longer, try to make it better, and in this chase of actually doing something better, you just lose out on the chance, the opportunity, the windows that you could have used. So delivering close to deadlines is something I would really do again.
It's interesting how you've, things that you've talked about as stuff that you used to do, back then, have actually suddenly become so prominent, and now are probably fundamental blocks of your professional future. And when I say your, it's not just yours. For most people in the knowledge economy, right? Stuff that you've talked about, writing better and creating videos. These are things that everyone now needs to do in terms of building their social capital. Any quick tips on how somebody can make that switch from somebody who was not doing these things or who was not paying attention to these things to, and they've realized that yes, this is something they ought to be doing more. Any quick ways in which they can get started?
So I've always felt that you write what you really know about. Don't try to write in anyone else's style. Don't try to create something which you don't feel comfortable with. But a good story, a good message is always something that is really true, and it is something unique that only you could have given. So write from your perspective. Keep the words simple, short sentences. You don't have to use any big words. And message it in such a way that the most important thing that you're trying to say, the most unique thing that you're trying to say, comes right at the start. So those are the five basic things that you can.
All right. Okay, the next question was, the answer to which was really, really interesting to me. I think of all the answers that we had got, then this was, very different, which is why I thought I will post this question to you today. One book or movie that you would have benefited from if you had encountered it before the age of 15. And I think you had a couple of options there. So,
Yeah.
if you can talk about.
Right. So I was one of those people who made a lot of switches in my choice of what I want to do. I did my 12th standard science, and then I switched over to arts, mostly because basically I did science only because I wasn't sure whether arts is something I would stick to. But there was also this thing of not being happy with the teachers I had, or not being happy with uh, the kind of education I felt I was ready for in college, in the years of my college, the time of my college. So Feynman lectures on physics was one thing that I read much later. In fact, I hadn't even heard about it until I got married to someone who loves physics. So Feynman lectures on physics, I think before anyone decides to give up science, they should really read that and see whether they still like it, because that changed the way I saw physics. I thought of it as a really drab subject, which was made even worse by teachers and even worse by tuitions and the pressure to crack it in the 12th standard. But I think a question that you asked earlier, how would you explain your career to a 5-year-old? That is something what Feynman does to physics in his series. So it's really enlightening. If you after that you still don't like science, feel free to switch, but go through that once. The second one, which I recently
I think that's a good litmus test to use, right?
And I think physics is one of the science that everyone hates, but I've learned that it's really it's just a way of making sense of nature, making sense of the world around you, and everything really is physics. So if you really hate physics and you are a curious person, and there's something definitely wrong, because it's telling you what the kind of world you're living in. So it's sort of a drawn out answer, but definitely worth reading the book, or even I think the YouTube now they have the series, the live lectures as well. Then one more was Obama's Dreams of My Father, which I took up because much later, after Obama finished his presidency. And I think we really underestimate the stories that we bring to our contribution, whether it's to work or whether it's to your own house or anywhere. Because if you see Obama's backstory, you wouldn't even want it for yourself. It's like all over the place. But the experiences and the way he went through his life, making sort of staying true to his values while everything around him was just changing so much, probably made him the person that he was. And the reason why he's so unique is because all those things contributed and they played their role in his story itself. So don't ignore your heritage, don't ignore the bad experiences, the good experiences that really make who you are. So if you're trying as a 15-year-old, as a young child, if you're trying to to craft your future by choosing really perfect options or thinking too much about, what will I do if I score less in 12th or less in 10th, it really doesn't matter, because everything that you do, everything that you don't do is going to make you who you are. And I think that book really helped me understand
Yeah,
that.
everything
And
adds up.
yeah, and the third one was by Sainath, by P. Sainath, who is who he used to be our teacher when we were in journalism school. And Everybody Loves a Good Draught is something that really opens your eyes to the country that you live in. Especially us who live in urban towns have this way of just shutting down our background, shutting down where we actually live, and just hurtle along your own path. But it really brings you back to uh, your reality. And like I said back then, that had I probably read that before, I would have taken up that UPSC exam and went about bringing real change in meaningful ways.
Yeah, yeah. So we still have enough opportunities to bring about a change,
Yeah.
make a dent through what we're doing here as well, Sanasi. And you're not alone in those lost aspirational lost aspirations of UPSC in the team, definitely.
Yeah.
All right. So the next question for you, Sanasi, a profession unrelated to anything we have done or worked in, which we should ideally know more about, which will help with planning for future relevance.
Right. So I really don't know what I answered back then, but in the since then, what I've gone through is I would choose data analysis and a data analyst or a data scientist. A lot of what we do, really, the numbers tell the story, as a lot of us know. And I think right from the start, even when I was helping my kid doing these basic data interpretation problems that they have, I realized that it really tells the story, the analytics. I mean, you might have your own perceptions, you might have your prejudices, but once you have those numbers staring at you, there's really no hiding. So understanding those numbers, making sense of them, especially going ahead when you'll be having a lot of ways to collect data, you wouldn't, if you don't know how to use it, it's really a waste. So knowing how to handle data and would be a very useful skill.
Yeah, nice. And interesting that the lead that you went with there was about storytelling and how the numbers help in telling a better story. I think that's very important. A lot of times, you end up focusing on the tool and the data, and then you sort of try to build a story around that. Whereas I think at least that's what I took from what you said was there's a story and you need the numbers, the data to actually back up that story.
Right. And I think the numbers tell their own story, irrespective of what you want to say. That's where the truth is going to lie. So.
Yeah, yeah. All right. And the last question for you, Sanasi, who is your favorite TV or film character and what can we learn from them about future fitness?
So actually, till 2 days ago, I wouldn't have been able to answer the second part of your question, but I've always chosen MASH used to be a favorite show of mine growing up. I think influenced me very majorly. It's sort of embarrassing in a way because it's a TV show at the end of the day. But just a couple of days ago, I read this article also, which I shared online, about written by a doctor in LA who said the same thing, that Hawkeye, the character of Hawkeye, who is for those who haven't seen MASH, he's a doctor who has been drafted in a war. He's a pacifist. He has been drafted in a war which he doesn't want, in the Vietnam, like the Korean War, but it was sort of a metaphor for Vietnam as well. In a place where he didn't want to be, surrounded by decision makers and sort of people who were forcing things in a very silly way on people without really seeing the bigger picture. And if you see the article that came out 2 days ago by that doctor said the same thing, that irrespective of the situation that you face yourself with, finding that humor, finding the way to deal with it by keeping your sanity, by doing your best in those situations, at the same time keeping your moral compass right on cue. That's really important, and it can be done. So we have 10 seasons of MASH in case you want to learn that lesson really well. But I think he's a great character to emulate as
Yeah, yeah. I think that the question of moral compass is something which a lot of people don't give a lot of thought on when they start thinking about future relevance and future fitness. But when you have things like algorithms and bots and what all is possible through science and technology, I think that moral compass is something which we ought to take very seriously and keep in mind, and not just go by what's possible. It's also a question of whether you ought to be doing something or not.
yeah. Like Dumbledore said, right?
Yeah,
Choice between the right and doing what is right and doing what is easy. It's always going to be difficult to choose what is right. But even especially today, when we are surrounded by messaging, which is so powerful that it's easy to take you for a ride. So, unless you have that gravity to stick to your course that you have chosen in a well thought of manner, it's easy to just get diverted and at least do no harm. If you're not uh, really doing much, just make sure whatever actions you're taking are not harming others. It's a good way.
yeah, yeah. Thanks, Anasi. That was one book that came to mind when I heard the last two or three answers of yours was Factfulness. I think it sums
Yeah,
up a lot of what you just mentioned, from numbers to stories to doing the right thing. So that's one recommendation from my side. At the end of this section with you. All
yeah.
right.
Okay.
Thanks, Anasi.
All right.
Yeah, and let's move to Sirisha. Hi, Sirisha. Thanks for coming here for this unique episode of Smartcast episode of CTQ, where we're talking about introducing people at Choose to Think and your answers to some of the future ring questions. So I want you to introduce yourself first, and you can give us both the LinkedIn friendly version of your introduction and how you would describe what you do, how you help CTQ to, say, a 75-year-old person.
Sure. Thanks for having me here, Harish. Yeah, I'll first go with my LinkedIn friendly version. I'm a consultant and upleveler at Choose to Think. I help solve problems for the CXOs by helping them build the right culture in the organization, a culture that is aligned to their business strategy. So I think that has all tick marks for the LinkedIn, right? All the keywords and other things for the LinkedIn intro. How would I explain what I do to a 75-year-old person, you said, right? Yeah, I work with companies to help them create a structure and an environment which defines how people think, work, talk, have fun, they grow there and build relationships at the workplace. It's just like a home where you have certain rules and values that you set. At the same time, it also provides you that energizing and safe place, right, to be the best that you can be. This is what I do for companies.
All right. Yeah. So the next question for you: one social or technology trend that could potentially affect your work in a negative way.
With increased technology, right? Quick learning is something that's picking up really fast, right? So Google has now become a verb. So people will say if they don't know something, they'll just Google it. So that quick learning or just getting answer to a point actually doesn't help people build perspectives, and how it's going to hurt what we do at Choose to Think is also the deep learning and expertise that we insist on people building, right? The compounding effect of continuously working on in one or two areas of choice while having that broader perspective is something that's important. So the deep learning is something that I see greatly affected because of the quick fixes where people just search, see what someone else has done, and try copying it without actually thinking deeper and finding out what they really want to do.
Yeah. So how would you address that? Any quick tips on how an individual should make sure that it is not affecting them in a negative way?
I think people need to understand their areas of passion, and they actually figure out what are those small things that they want to do and build those tiny habits where they do work on it. So if it's art, figure out what do you like and start doing it every day. If it's wanting to become the best data scientist in the world, right? If that's how you visualize yourself to be, that's where you start working on something constantly. You don't let quick fixes become part of your solution, but you actually work on building your own body of work.
Right. Yeah. So, if you remember, we had done a series of questions in, I think, April and May, where we had focused on, questions related to the changes brought about by the whole COVID-19 situation and people working from home. So, this question, the answer to this question might be relevant for at least the rest of 2020. So, the question that I wanted to pick your brains on was, what can people and companies do to make sure they don't lose their remote working muscle if and when they go back to working primarily in an office space?
Sure. So what has happened once remote work was enforced in most of the companies, right? In almost all the companies around us, what's happened is if you see those that are very successful, those which had productive teams, all the clients that we work with, people we interact with, what we've seen is those that are successful are places where you have enormous level trust equation, right? The supervisors trust the teams and the employer trusts the employee, and people are empowered to make decisions. And if someone is not online, you still assume that the person is working. So that heightened sense of ownership has come out in all the places where we have seen where even in remote workspace they've still maintained their productivity, or at places we also hear about the productivity increasing significantly. The second thing that I saw what happened in the last few months is this whole aspect of rationalization, right? So there's lesser revenue that is projected, so people start rationalizing. They started considering restructuring. They're actually looking at all roles. They see, is this role still relevant, or is it a redundant role that we have? So they've become more prudent about cost, and they're actually looking at driving efficiency. But I feel you don't need a pandemic to do this to you, right? These are things that this is the muscle that companies and management needs and leadership needs to build, where they're constantly looking at relooking at some of these. What it also means for people is get your antennae up. If you think you're doing something that is repeated, mundane, very soon your organization is going to invest in technology, which means you might lose your job. So it's right now you need to start planning for upskilling and cross-skilling yourself. And other part that I've seen more from individual employee standpoint is flexi work hours. There's some people who've openly come out to organizations and saying, look, there's enough for me to do at home, in terms of my chores or taking care of the children, taking care of the elders. So it's very important that I have that flexibility. And very interesting statistics that we have seen with some of the companies is people are working only for like 5 to 6 hours in a day, but are still delivering 80% of what they're supposed to deliver. So why, because that's the focus time. They're being very rational, prudent about, okay, this is the focus time that I can give for my work. And they're still able to do their best. Unlike what happens in the physical structure of the organization, where a lot of time goes off either in meetings, a lot of coffee chats, and informal conversations that keep going on, or a lot of unwanted meetings also at times, right? So these are things, I think these are all the positives that the pandemic has shown about how we can improve our efficiency significantly in the way we work. At the same time, being very, very employee friendly, right? It could be young mothers, it could be people who are also caregivers. So it also probably looking at all of these, putting things in perspective and actually designing roles to suit this will probably attract more people to the workforce. So I think these are some things that organizations shouldn't lose if they start going back to the physical world.
Yeah. Okay. Next question, Sirisha, for you. If you had to give one last talk, what would you talk about?
like I was mentioning earlier, I think focus on building how people should start focusing on building tiny habits to become the best they can be every single day. So it's doing the best that you can be at any point in time.
Okay, so that leads me to the next and last question for you, Sirisha, and I hope there's a different answer for this. So, one piece of advice for someone about to join the workforce, which will help keep them relevant even in 2040.
Okay, so I have three pieces of advice. Can I go ahead with all three?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, one is continuous learning. I think there is no shortcut to that. One has to constantly keep learning, keep getting updated about industry best practices. This could be done either through reading or by talking to people, but networking and actually constantly understanding what is happening around in your area of work and also the world over is something that's extremely important. So continuous learning, constantly upskilling oneself. The second part is working on communication skills. Because even if you're fantastic in what you do, if you're not able to communicate, then you lose out on opportunities. So it's very important to work on communication skills. What I'll also include in communication is the whole aspect of showcasing what you're doing, right? Building that social capital, trying to showcase your work so that the world gets to see it. I think we need to just not go on to the level of bragging, but actually start showcasing work. The third part is putting your hand up for any opportunity that comes your way, even if you're not fully prepared. Because what I've seen in my years of experience working in corporates as well as working as a consultant is you're never 100% ready. A lot of learning happens on the job. What you read from books or in courses or classes is still theoretical until you start applying. So you can take it up. You're at least 30-40% close to what is needed to perform that role. Put your hand up and take those opportunities. That's where the best learning happens, and that's what will continue keeping you relevant for the rest of your life.
Yeah, we read about this in, I was reminded about what we read about in the Startup Nation about Israel, right? Where they just don't waste time in, building credentials before launching a business venture. They just go ahead and do it. It had, what you spoke had echoes of the same sentiment. So that struck me. So thanks a lot, Sirisha. I'm sure these three pieces of advice are, what will be relevant not just for people joining now, which will help them stay relevant in 2040, but also people who will end up, joining workforce in 2040 as well. These are, timeless things that we should be thinking about. So
Harish, before we go, we thought since you have put us on the spot, let us go down memory lane to some of the things that some of the questions that we discussed and you had interesting answers to. So if you remember, one of the questions we spoke about was a change to your routine in the last 4 months. Why has that happened? What you learned about routines as a process? What would you say is your learning experience from the past 4 months?
Okay, so a big change has happened in the last 4 months. I think a lot has changed for a lot of people. But I used to always say that I lead this Adarsh Balak kind of a life where everything is set. I used to play tennis in the morning, and because I used to go in the morning, I had to sleep early in the night, and everything else would revolve around that. And I had very clear, set pattern for the rest of the day as well. So what changed was that because of the lockdown, getting up in the morning, I would actually, ask myself, why am I getting up? What is, what makes me get up from the bed? And since there's no way to play tennis, why do I even get up now at 5:30 or whatever? So, that led to so the initial month after the lockdown started, I was very lethargic, no exercise, nothing. And then I started putting my treadmill and cycle at home to good use, which I would never do earlier because I would prefer cycling outside and going out. And the big change that brought in my life is getting to listen to podcasts. So I've always stayed away from listening to podcasts because I wanted to be, this mindful when I'm doing any particular, task or chore or action. And I did not want to listen to podcasts while driving. And my big physical activity was playing tennis, and of course I couldn't be listening to podcasts when I was playing tennis. So it actually very deliberately resisted the idea of podcasts. And I remember we'd done a post some time back about what are your favorite podcasts, and a lot of people to me have gushed about how good podcasts are, and I've been saying, oh no, not for me, not for me. But the last 4 months, last 3.5 months for sure, has made a big change where a lot of my information diet comes from podcasts. So many interesting ideas that I've heard about, so many interesting books that I've been recommended. I've found them through the world of podcasts, and I think that's been a big change in my life in the last 4 months.
So on that note, do you want to gush about one podcast that you would recommend to anyone?
So there are a few, there are a couple by Amit Verma, which are big favorites, The Seen and Unseen and the Econ Central. Conversations with Tyler is again a big favorite. One thing that I've been liking a lot lately is Adam Grant's, podcast. I think it's in conjunction, in association with TED. But he brings out this, very interesting facets of different topics that he talks about, and they also end up talking about and going into offices of some of the sponsors who are involved with the show. So that's an interesting one that I've been following in the last month or so.
Okay, so some great ones to follow there.
Yes.
Next question for you is, what is it that you think you're good at that people don't come to you for?
Okay. So typically, a lot of people come to me, people who are in this wanapreneur stage, right? And a lot of people are usually shocked at how Raman and I have been able to actually make this a financially viable thing. You do things that you're interested in, you have a lot of fun doing them, and you're making money out of it. So then, or at least surviving, making whatever you're making out of it. So that's a question that a lot of people have. One thing that I wish more people would come and talk to me about is just making sense of of your business. It's not just about when people come to me. Yes, I happen to end up giving some great advice. Great, because a lot of times it is not what they what they find in good taste, but that's what they finally later come back and tell me that, yeah, good that you told me at that point not to make that decision. So that's why I say that with the 2020 vision, I know that it was great advice. But I wish more people would also come to me, talk to me about business problems after somebody has established something. So I have this great set of people who come and talk to me about stuff before the setup, and of course all the CTQ kind of problem statements that are there. But I think in between also there's this area where I think I can help, but probably not too many people coming to ask me about those things.
So that's an open invitation there for those who
Yes.
should act on it. What do you think is a fanciful idea for engaging knowledge worker employees in the future?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one, because I've often thought about it, and now it's not that fanciful for me personally when I think about it, but something like what Marie Kondo does with people's wardrobes. So there's so many of these knowledge workers around, people who are working in the knowledge economy, who are probably suffering from the same kind of problems like anxiety and information overload. A lot of the answers are actually this detoxification and cleansing right? Cleaning up your information sources so that you are actually getting good information into your life, which will only add to you, right? It is not something which is going to take something away, or which is not going to add anxiety to you. So a lot of what we do on the CTQ side, whether it's whether it's the daily reader compound, which introduces you to so many different topics through stuff that people read, and the kind of habits that we are helping people form, whether it's a reading habit, whether it's a reflection habit. I think these are great things that these are small tweaks that you can make to your life, tiny changes, tiny habits that will have a disproportionate impact in the future, which we are doing. And I think that will be a great way to probably package as a one whole thing, as I'm working in the knowledge economy, I'm a consultant, or I'm in marketing or whatever, and just help me fix all of these things so that I can be a better version of myself. Yes, that's where CTQ could go and do a whole range of things with these people.
Yeah, I think that's something people they see the bigger picture only when they really zoom out. By that time, it's too late. So if there's someone giving you those inputs, setting it out for you, spelling it out for you, it would be really useful. You're a film person. That's the little thing that we know. Big Amitabh Bachchan fan. Who is your favorite film or TV character, and what can we learn about them regarding future fitness?
Okay, so a favorite TV or film character is the role character played by Ashok Kumar in Choti Si Baat, Colonel Julius Nagendranath Wilfred Singh, right? So he's like this coach who's based in somewhere near Lonavala, and Amol Palekar plays this role of a person who's a bit timid and shy, and needs a huge dose of self-confidence. So Amol Palekar goes to Ashok Kumar, Colonel Julius Nagendranath Wilfred Singh, and he tells him, he gives him tips about everything from how to handle himself, to how to speak more confidently, to how to order stuff in a restaurant. So when if you just go back to the previous question about what can we do for knowledge workers, that's what he was doing. And this was, I think, late 70s, probably 77 or 76. And in fact, there's a very interesting scene, since you mentioned Amitabh there, right? So there's a scene where Amitabh Bachchan, the film actor, comes to get some tips from Ashok Kumar's character. He actually gives him tips about taxation, right? So imagine a person who is helping people on all possible things. And a lot of times people actually come to us. Like I said, we're talking about habits, we're talking about reflection, reading. So much of making sense of the world is what is involved in what we do. This is back in 70s, so people could imagine the concept of an up-leveler back then. Now it's even more important. So I think, Colonel Julius Nagendranath Wilfred Singh, and I took some effort to make sure that I remember the full name of that character. So he's one of my favorite characters, and a lot to learn from him.
That's definitely one that we would definitely be at least YouTubing to see what that is like.
Yeah.
Here's an imaginary scenario for you. So suppose the Indian internet is down with a massive cyber attack, and it will take a month to get it back. What would, or what could, and what should choose to think do?
Yeah. So I remember this question, and we thought of something like these when we considered this whole idea of futures planning, right? Scenarios. A lot of what we do, whether it's all the compounds that we are running, where we send out links to people to read every day, so that they have a good start to their day, 15 days of wisdom, as we call it, to stuff around reflection, where we send them a question to reflect upon, or something like Future Stack, which is about reading and thinking about future relevance. All of that is being delivered online today, right? And one of the things about looking at something like future relevance is to just question all assumptions that we have. And one big assumption here that we're working with is that we are going to have internet all the time to deliver all this content, content and questions. So this was something which was very important for us. And what would we do as CTQ? A lot of what we can do is, we could actually take out printouts of all this kind of content in advance, because yes, there was a qualification to the question. Internet was down, but we still had electricity, we still had phone lines. So I'm going to use that use that margin that was provided in that question to say that I'm going to take a printout of the article that we were supposed to send to people. We're going to make a call to those people and say that, yeah, I'm going to read out the article. It's not going to take more than 10 to 15 minutes, and hopefully that should deliver the daily dose of wisdom for those people, and also improve our speaking skills.
And as they say that even when COVID happened, nobody really thought this was even a scenario that you should consider, but people find their ways. And I think with all the skills, the habit breeding that I think a lot of us spoke about, you get yourself into a position where you can handle those kind of situations without a hitch, and you get that confidence of knowing your way out. You'll figure something out. What is the big deal, sort of a thing.
Yeah. And doing these exercises gives us that confidence that we can deal with whatever comes.
Totally. Yeah. So just to round it up, this was Choose to Think for all of you guys, and we came back to Harish since he started the conversation. Back to you to just sign off.
Yeah. Thanks, Anasi. And like I said, I think this should give a good introduction and peek into the minds of everyone here at Choose to Think, what we do, what we think we do, what we tell people what we do. So there should not be much of a dissonance there. And also, a peek into how we think about these kind of questions. And it's a great way to, keep building your muscle that gets you ready to deal with, most of what future will throw at you. So that's all. Thank you.